let me do my official little intro.
Okay.
And I don't know much of what we're talking about today, but I did do a little
Yeah.
prep.
Two good topics that are somewhat interrelated.
All right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another webcast of Alexandra Mayors Live. And today, once more, I am joined by my friend, Mr. Steve Washington of the Black Wealth Network. You can always check out his website, www.bwnonline.com. And of course, you can follow him on Twitter via @WealthGapNet. So, what's going on, Steve? And we had a little chat before we got started today, but I'll let you go ahead and lead us into your world, because you have a couple of exciting topics that you want to cover that are very timely when it comes to the news.
Yeah, I think, these are timely. For some people might think these are mundane topics, but the two topics that have popped up since last we spoke. One, Facebook stocks. I just want to touch on that because there's a lot going on with Facebook, not only the stock, but the company and Cambridge Analytica. And then the other thing, this whole issue around Trump's trade policy and sanctions and really what that is, because I run into a lot of people, and what I found is you can ask them about something, then you ask them, what does that actually mean? They actually have no idea. So a lot of people don't even actually know what a trade deficit really is and how it's sort of calculated. But then, there's a lot of policies behind it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was Facebook. So everybody's familiar with Facebook. Facebook, in the last, say, less than a month, has gone from over 150 to 100 and, about $195 a share all the way down today to $153. So it took a huge tumble in a short.
Let's familiarize everybody about what's going on with Facebook, because some people might not read the news and they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been revealed that over the years, Facebook has basically data mined and collected as much personal data of all of their users as possible, and they've sold that data to political firms who have created political ads that are targeted for each and every type of individual that they were able to essentially profile. So that's, the real question is, how much has that affected elections? I think tremendously. I think it is a form of cheating. It's very invasive. And that's freaked out a lot of people about Facebook, and it really should freak out a lot of people about social media in general and just the internet. But it is what it is, but it's really opened people's eyes. So that's why there's this crisis when it comes to stocks and everything that Mr. Washington is sharing with us. So
what was crazy about the Cambridge Analytical scheme was that the way they did it was they sent out surveys to like 200,000 people, but somehow all those people's friends' profiles and information got exposed to that, so it came up to like 50 million people ended up getting their information sort of co-opted. And then this British firm, Cambridge Analytica, because it's associated with Cambridge University in London, basically sold it to the Trump campaign and who knows who else. But so as a result of that, now all these social media companies are under a lot of scrutiny because they're going to be more heavily regulated. So now you're going to see laws that force them to do certain things to make sure privacy is disclosed and so forth and so on. So the question is, A, how does that impact the company in terms of its future earnings? Because they're going to have to change how they sell ads. There's going to be a lot of impact. But also, is this like the turning point in their user growth? Like, or now, is this it? It's like, did Facebook literally peak last week? And now it's all downhill from here. Because when I look at the stock, the price, the numbers that they put up are amazing. But can they hold up? For example, just so people understand, Facebook's net income meaning after they pay for everything, last year was 18 billion. Okay, their
Wow.
revenue was $40 billion.
Wow.
That's how much they rake in a year. So, you know, that's it's huge. That's why Mark Zuckerberg is the fourth richest person in the world, even
Yeah.
though he lost a chunk of it in the last week.
He doesn't care. That's why a lot of people I've noticed have commented in regards to him on the news. They're like, for him to be in so much trouble, he seems so low key and mellow. And it's like he doesn't care. He's so rich that he could close Facebook tomorrow, have a lot less things to worry about. But I mean, what's interesting to me, though, when it comes to people's reaction in regards to this whole, database scandal, I guess that's what you can call it, is that there, considering how free the internet is, nothing in life is ever free. It's always a trade off.
Mhm.
And, people should have realized for many years that, of course, the social networks that are free for everyone to use, in actuality, were basically harvesting our souls, because that's what it is.
It wasn't really free. It's not really free.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm
You got
wondering.
to pay with your information.
Yeah, well, when it comes to just the human thought process, what scares me about using Google nowadays, and I do love the Google products, love you, YouTube, but
Mhm.
I kind of think to myself, I'm like, are they just trying to collect as much data of every human being in the world so that they can upload it all into a hard drive, kill us all, and then just have Android people walking around, but with our same personalities? I watch too much Star
Well,
Trek, I know,
they say
but
if you want to use
that's what I think it
want to
is.
use Facebook and protect your privacy, don't like anything because they use
True.
likes. The likes are the primary. Because if you think about it, you don't really put that much information about yourself on Facebook. My home, you
Some
don't have to put
people always use Facebook, though. Some people are
information. Is
always
what
on there.
you like.
I'm
Yeah.
not, but
What are you
most
liking? What
people.
are you commenting on? Commenting on? What are you? That's
It's
what
the
makes
people who
it.
work in like offices who
Mhm.
are just also incredibly nosy about their coworkers and people in their lives who become addicted to Facebook. And that really is your average middle American. I
Mhm.
hate to say it, but they're all on Facebook. I never really got into Facebook. I like Twitter a lot,
Yeah, me too.
but Facebook, I mean, with all this, I had like a little fan page up from, my old days, and I took that down when I saw the news about this. And I think I'm just gonna, if my Facebook wasn't linked to another account that I have, I would close it. And I think I'm just gonna close it anyway
But
because I'm just over it.
definitely, if you have something out there on Facebook that's old, I would if this is not a sign to let me. You know how people have like, yeah, I would get
Yeah,
all of that crap. For me,
I
it's just
think
friends
I'm
and
just
family.
done.
That's it, and that's really me just looking. I don't even want to.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Here's
I
the
feel like
really
this is just a
participate.
tip of the iceberg. I
It
mean,
is.
look, if Facebook is doing this and they're the top of the food chain, think about every single other little company that's probably doing way more, and we're probably never going to hear about it.
That's
So,
true. So my question is, what I've been wrestling it with is, do I buy the stock or not? Because it's super cheap. It's super cheap right now. I mean, and really, I mean, they're expected to grow their earnings 76% this year. I mean, their 5 year growth rate is like 240, 234% a year. So
wow.
they're,
Well, I mean, things
but if the
cannot get
party's over, the
worse.
party's over. Huh?
Well, I don't think it is over because they're too big and too many
Right.
people want a part of that money. And a lot of people are probably thinking exactly like how you're thinking right now. So, I mean, Facebook does not have to only be a social media network. That's what people don't understand about all these social media networks and websites that everyone uses. They can essentially become their own entertainment network. Facebook could basically become like, you remember how MTV used to be?
Hmm.
I mean, Facebook, they could just have their own little network, their own little news, and then eventually they could have dramas. They could have everything. And
True.
some people would, because Facebook's so popular, like, what if they came up with a Facebook phone to where all that it is a freaking way for you to access your Facebook,
Hmm.
and then they have like their whole own internet. That's what I predict. That's what I think a lot of companies like that are going to do, because we're already seeing YouTube do it. YouTube has the live TV now. They have their own little social network basically within YouTube. I have a feeling that the channels itself are going to start expanding to where you can probably create your own forum if you want to. They already have your own chat window if you're like a,
Hmm.
webcaster like I do sometimes. I think that really YouTube could be its own standalone thing to where you could have a device that is only YouTube, and I'm sure it exists if it doesn't. And maybe it could be your phone also, but it could be like only your phone and YouTube and maybe a web browser. But I don't think these companies are going anywhere. I mean, when Alexa came out with all their little devices that you can put in every room, and then Google came out with like the same thing afterwards.
Hmm.
I mean, I think these internet companies are going to basically become kind of like your information company, like your internet, but also your utility of some sort, because I think that the whole smart house thing, that's
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
Yeah, the
It just
Internet of Things is not going anywhere. You're
right. I don't think that.
right.
I think that if you can buy your Facebook stock, buy it.
Yeah, yeah, it's at a good price. I might go get some. A good, if somebody's interested in how to do that, a good place to get individual stock cheap by the dollar is Stockpile. I don't know if we talked about Stockpile before, but stockpile.com. You can go on. You could buy $5 worth of Facebook. There you go. So, but I might dip in there. I just want to see if I'm trying to see if it'd go a little lower. I'd like to see it below
Well, that
one.
might be like my first stock because I'm gonna do it tomorrow.
Yeah,
Sure am. That'll be like my first one. We'll see what happens, and I could be totally wrong, but I think that Facebook is going to go back up,
you're
and I
probably
think it's going to become something else. I think just like Twitter is about to become something.
yeah.
Twitter is basically bigger than CNN, and it knows it.
Oh yeah, it is. And
It's like
it's been struggling. It's been beat up too. That's another good one to buy if you believe in it because it's been beat down a little bit here.
I think maybe I will. Yeah, because Twitter has actually. I have like a relationship with Twitter. That's almost.
Really,
Yeah.
you're joking. I would have never known that.
Yeah. But I just feel like Facebook and Twitter are going to become something a bit more than they are. And I'm not sure exactly what. Maybe there's not even a word for it yet. But I think that they're going to go from only like an online presence to somehow being in the material world more. I just don't know how.
Hmm.
How do
Hmm.
you think? Do you see kind of what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
but I mean, one of the things I've noticed about Twitter, there's a number of really good, like 24/7 news channels, that are popping up on Twitter, like TikTok by
Yeah.
Bird, and there's another one, and I was like, that's pretty hot to like. You could launch a media company. You could, literally on and run it on Twitter, which I think is kind of cool
You sure can.
because
I
it's
mean,
a little more,
I
yeah, which I like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, like
I could see them transforming
I
into
think
something
that
like that.
Twitter should forget about that mesh up with Periscope and only have its own video live video function instead of having to go, because there's a lot of weird sketchy
They own
things about.
Periscope, right?
I'm not
Mhm.
sure, but when it comes to Periscope, there have been too many people to have their accounts closed, and no reason given. So it's kind
To
of
go back and
like,
do some Periscope. I haven't done Periscope.
yeah. Well, I like the YouTube Live little function.
Hmm.
I like the Twitter videos because like I uploaded a little video on Twitter today. I was in the car and I'm like, I've never done a Twitter, specifically a Twitter video. I'm gonna do it. So I
Yeah.
did it, but
Okay.
I think that maybe there's gonna be some sort of like more Twitter type devices maybe that
Yeah.
Twitter could sell, because they need something that that brings everyday life more so into Twitter. I should work for Twitter, but but
Yeah,
that's what they
they should hire you.
that's what they need. That there needs to be more of a branch or a gateway. Maybe maybe Alexa already kind of does that. I don't know if there's like a Twitter for Alexa, but I want something to where I can just be walking around the house and I think to myself, I want to see what at wealthgap.net is tweeting at this very moment because I'm too lazy to pick up my phone and see. I just wanted to pop in front of my face. I wish that there was something
So
to
you
where
so
I
you've
could
got
just.
so you've got some virtual your regular glasses are really virtual reality glasses, and if you say, "Oh, what's going on Wealth Gap?" Not then boom, okay.
Yeah, yeah, like that Google Glass. Whatever happened to the Google Glass? I don't know if you remember that. It was like the
Yes.
little, maybe like a cyborg or something.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that came off too good. They put that on the back burner, but
I need a Twitter contact lens. That's what it needs to be. I can
there
just
you
put the
go.
little lens in my eye, and I'll even have like a little bird so that when you wear it, people know that you got the Twitter
Wait,
contact lens on.
yeah, you put that right from your contact lens voice activated. There you go.
You'll have people getting in car accidents because they'll get like a tweet from somebody that they don't like. They're like,
Oh, no,
ah!
no, 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 no. We'll be in self-driving cars. We don't have to worry about that.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah. Well, what I like about those self-driving cars is that it seems like I don't know if you saw that there's been like a bunch of the
Oh,
accidents
yeah. Other than them hitting
lately.
people, they're great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's how they can get rid of people, certain people that are troublemakers, I guess. But
Buy a little Facebook, buy a little Twitter here.
yeah. All right. So, what else were we going to talk about when it
So
came
the
to?
second thing, only because this has been in the news briefly, and that is the trade deficit, the trade war, the tariffs, all these terms. And
Yeah.
Trump, first they announced tariffs on steel and aluminum, which we talked about. Then they came back and announced other measures, specifically against China, to close that deficit. And then China came back with a retaliatory proposal. Now, they're all proposals, like none of it's been enacted. So it seems like this is just a way to negotiate a better deal. But I've had people who are, like, don't. So what a trade deficit is, it's really just we import, we export, they import, we export, and basically, since we import more from them than we export to them, we have a trade deficit. So all it really means is we buy more of their stuff than they buy of our stuff now.
Right.
That because of unfair trade practices? That's what Donald Trump is trying to say. That the Chinese have unfair trade practices. They don't let certain products in. They put high taxes, those are tariffs, on stuff going in there, and then we don't do that to them. So that's the argument.
Yeah.
So it's political, but right now, just to put it in perspective, just to give you this, the U.S. last year has last year had a $375 billion trade deficit with China. Now I know that sounds large, but our GDP is over $20 trillion. So the deficit to GDP ratio in terms of our Chinese trade deficit is tiny. It's like a day in our economy. It's really not numerically significant. It's politically significant, right? But the stock market totally crashed last week, lost over 1,000 points because of this. Because if you actually did it, then it would hurt. And one of the things that came out is China came back and said, we're going to put tariffs on your agriculture. The biggest U.S. export to China is agriculture. Guess who some of Trump's biggest supporters are? Farmers, right? The red states. So they knew
Yeah.
what they were doing when they came back. So now we're at the table negotiating. Because trust me, Trump does not want Chinese tariffs on U.S. agriculture. Not at all. Now, when you dig down and look further into what we actually import from China, it's mostly a bunch of electronics. In fact, it's 80% electronics, electronic components, basically cheap, everyday electrical stuff that we don't even make here anymore. So, it,
Clothes also, as you're talking about all this, is making me think of like that website, Alibaba. I think that's what it's
mhm,
called,
yep.
where you can import a lot of things. Also, like when it comes to women's wear, um, the findings for like little jewelry stuff, it's really a lot of junk
Yeah,
that
it's
people just
junk. It's
that
trinket,
we should be making within America, anyways.
but
So
it's too expensive to make it here. I mean, that's a problem. Like,
well, I mean, the thing is that people have gotten away from quality of items, and instead they're just looking for quantity or cheap and replace it
mhm,
not too long from now.
stuff that's in
But
your value
still,
here. Yeah, it's in
yeah,
your
and
dollars, the
I, I,
stuff that's in your dollar
yeah,
store. So I say that to say the stock market crashing over this, I think, is another opportunity. I don't think there's any way, shape, or form there's going to be a trade war. I think this is purely negotiating tactics. If you look at it, when he imposed the steel tariffs, he let everybody out of it. So everybody got exempted. All the major importers got, the stock market being down, these stocks, this is a good time to sort of buy in. But I wouldn't believe the hype in terms of trade deficits.
it's educational.
Yeah.
One thing I always think about those, I mean, we hear all of this news about deficits and how we're in so much trouble, and um, the tariffs on the imports and exports and everything. But I always kind of look at how much of this is going to really affect my immediate life right now at this moment, and like over the next, I don't know, 4 years. So let me ask you that question: Is all of this bad news really going to majorly change and affect my life over the next 4 years, or yours?
Possibly. Now, when you talk about, you said deficits, there's really two types of deficits. There's the
Well,
trade
I feel
deficit.
like a lot of this is political,
Mm-hmm.
really, and I just feel like a lot of the things that are happening, I feel like if we had somebody else in power, it just
It
wouldn't
wouldn't
be so
happen.
bad.
But
Yeah.
what I was going to distinguish is like short term, long, like a trade deficit. I don't think that's going to affect your life over the next 4 years. I really don't.
Okay.
Whatever happens with that, because they're not going to do a trade war of any significance. It's too much money to lose.
Okay. Well, that's good.
The other type of deficit, so the federal budget deficit, meaning the U.S. government spending more than it takes in, which forces us to borrow money to make up the difference. That's so Trump's tax bill, which significantly reduces, income to the government because it's a big tax cut. But then you notice they just passed a huge spending bill. So there was an article like we got to borrow $300 billion just in the next couple months just to make up for the deficit in our spending that could affect you because what that does is it drives up interest rates. We could go into a recession because
Yeah.
of that tax bill.
Someone
So
else
yeah,
was telling me that too.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
So it can, but in the short term, I don't think none of it's going to be that impactful. So we'll see though.
All right. I have one last question for you. Do you think America is working out or not?
You
Um, because just
mean
lately,
American democracy?
yeah. Do you think
Man,
our way of life is going to be about like this throughout the rest of our lifetimes,
I,
or do you think there's going to be a
do think it's
big
working out.
change?
I'm gonna pull up this chart next time. It's on my Twitter. I have a chart. It's so interesting. It goes back to 1787 all the way through now. And the
Okay.
chart is the percentage of eligible voters as a percentage of the overall population. Would
Oh,
you
so it's
believe
consistently rising. That's what.
it's rising, it's going straight up. And would you
Good.
believe in
Okay.
1887, only 2% of the population could vote because you had to be a
That's
21-year-old
shitty.
white male
That's
landowner?
true. That's
White men
true.
who weren't landowners didn't get to vote until the mid 1800s. So you see this chart where
Well,
it's
you just
basically,
brightened my day because,
yeah,
I think I was getting a little too pessimistic
no, no,
there
no, no.
because, maybe that's why there's such a pushback right now because
Exactly.
the people are
Exactly
getting
right.
the power.
That is exactly
Yeah. Okay.
right. As
All right. I
democracy is
feel better now.
expanding, because see, American
Yeah.
democracy, for all its lore of being great, it's been very begrudging. Okay, American
It's very
democracy,
elitist.
like
Yeah.
democracy
Yeah.
for me, and then everybody else works for us, right? Women, you
Right.
don't
Right.
vote.
Right.
Black people, you're not even people. White men without land, you don't get to vote. That's literally was their
Yeah.
idea of democracy. So
Well,
now it's
yeah.
forced its way, and as you see this demographic shift, all of a sudden America is going to be majority minority. That's why you see this
Yeah.
crap fest
Yes.
going on, this grasping for straws and all this. But the demographics are overwhelming. There's nothing they can do about
That's
it.
true. Even,
The Second Amendment is
yeah.
not going to save you. A wall is not going to save you.
There's no,
And globally, it's the same thing. Africa is the fastest growing place on earth over the next century. The
really.
continent of Africa, yes. So it's not just here in the United States. Globally,
Okay.
this place is browning, and that's why you're seeing all this freak out. So
Yeah.
yes, I do believe I do. Although American democracy is getting ready to be tested though, over
It
the next
is.
couple of decades, it's going to getting ready to be tested.
Well, I mean, just this week, a lot of things are getting ready to be tested. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
we're in the pre-test mode now. We're in the
Well,
how
I
you
mean,
know practice test.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and conclude this webcast. So, thank you everyone for joining me and Mr. Washington here on Alexandra Mayer's Live, Black Wealth Network edition.